There are days when you wake up feeling unfamiliar. Everything around you is the same, the familiar room, the birds singing outside the window, the warm cup of coffee in your hand. But inside, you know something has shifted. You feel like you're drifting through a life that still bears your name, but no longer moves the way it used to. Things are out of rhythm. People you trusted suddenly grow distant. The good things come and go, as if some invisible force is pulling you back. You have no proof, only intuition, but it's screaming. Sometimes, life doesn't fall apart because you made the wrong choice. It falls apart because something or someone is quietly pushing you off course. In a world where attacks no longer come with swords, but hide behind glances, words, or even harmless gifts, what you need is not fear, but awareness. Stoicism doesn't teach us to fight everything. It teaches us to see clearly and to act from that clarity, because you cannot protect what you do not recognize. And today, we will begin to recognize those signs calmly, deliberately, and without fear. 1. Intuition warns you, but you ignore it. We live in a world ruled by reason, yet the most important things in life aren't defined by logic. You might not remember the details of a conversation, but you'll remember how you felt when you walked out of that room, whether you felt light or like something was pressing on your chest. You don't need data or evidence to know when someone isn't sincere. You only need to be present enough to hear the voice within. And that voice is intuition. Intuition is not a fleeting thrill or a hunch fueled by emotion. It's a primal intelligence that existed in you long before you learned to speak. When our ancestors lived in the wilderness, they didn't have Google to check whether the animal before them was dangerous or if the stranger in the cave could be trusted. They survived by sensing. Intuition is not vague. It's a survival mechanism embedded in your nervous system, a fine-tuned alignment between perception and the unconscious, between what the eye cannot see and what the heart still knows. The problem is, as we grow up, we're taught to dismiss it. In school, at work, even in our homes, we're trained to have a reason, to show proof. Children who say, "I don't like this person," are scolded for being rude. Adults who decline an invitation because something feels off are called oversensitive. Slowly, day by day, we learn to silence our instincts, trading emotional safety for social approval. But the price of that silence can be steep. Do you remember the last time you ignored your intuition? Maybe you said yes, while your entire being was screaming no. Maybe you stayed in a conversation, a relationship, a room when every cell in your body was begging to leave. And what happened? You got hurt. You burned out. You lost a part of yourself. And the most painful thing wasn't what the other person did. It was that you already knew, but you didn't trust yourself. Epictetus once said, "The free man is the one who listens to himself." In today's world, this doesn't only mean freedom from desire or anger. It's also a reminder that in every decision, you have a silent ally, your inner sense. Intuition doesn't speak in language. It doesn't draw diagrams. It just asks that you pause, listen, and don't dismiss it simply because it doesn't sound rational. In Stoicism, there's no place for impulsive reaction, but there's also no dismissal of instinct. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Clarity begins when you see clearly, without rushing to conclusions." Intuition is the starting point of that clarity. When you enter a strange situation, when someone unsettles you, you don't need to act immediately, but you must acknowledge it. You must remember, so that when the rest of the picture becomes clear, you won't be blindsided. Because the deepest wounds don't come from what we didn't know, they come from what we knew, but didn't face. That's why intuition is not an emotion. Emotions come and go, shaped by time and external triggers. But intuition runs deeper beneath words, beneath thought, sometimes even beneath awareness. It is the echo of experience, of unhealed wounds, of things you can't yet name but feel with unsettling clarity. And if you start paying attention, you'll realize intuition is rarely wrong, you just didn't want to believe it. So if today your heart flinches when you step into a certain place, if a chill runs down your spine while speaking with someone, or if you can't explain why you're exhausted when you get home, don't brush it off. Pause, observe, take note, and treat it as a critical piece of data. Because in a world where harm often wears an invisible mask, intuition is your first armor. And like any armor, it only works if you choose to wear it. There's a hard truth. Most of our deepest wounds didn't arrive without warning. They were foretold. A glance that made your stomach drop. A sentence that caught in your throat. A tiny moment when you clearly felt something's not right. But you brushed it off. You were busy. You didn't want to make waves. You chose false peace over honest discomfort. And when everything finally collapsed, it wasn't your heart that broke first. It was your trust in yourself. Intuition doesn't shout at you. It whispers. And if you only hear the loud things, you'll miss the one voice always on your side. It doesn't try to convince you with logic. It just hands you a feeling. No explanation, no justification, but with a clarity so sharp that if you're quiet enough, you can't ignore it. And if you keep dismissing it, you'll lose the most essential connection of all, the one between you and yourself. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Don't act unless your mind is clear. Observe and let clarity guide you." In an age of noise, clarity doesn't come from what's outside. It comes from the flash inside you where truths have no words yet, but already carry weight. Intuition brings no evidence, but it has been right more times than you care to admit. Think back to the last time someone betrayed you. Before it happened, how many times did you sense something off? How often did you notice the hesitation in their voice, the avoidance in their eyes? And how many times did you tell yourself, "I'm overthinking," only to later sit in pain, repeating that familiar phrase, "I knew it"? The issue isn't that you didn't see. It's that you chose not to see. Stoicism doesn't ask you to distrust everyone. It doesn't tell you to grow suspicious. On the contrary, it teaches you to observe without reacting, to listen without rushing to judgment. And intuition is the raw material of that observation. When something feels off, don't fight it, don't panic. Just notice. Because each time you do, you're rebuilding a sense dulled by social conditioning, the sense that detects unspoken truth. You don't need to see the whole picture. You only need the courage not to turn away from what you already feel. Because every invisible attack, whether it's toxic energy, hidden malice, or subtle manipulation, must first pass through a gate called intuition. And in the moment it knocks, you have only two options. Open it and look closely, or pretend you didn't hear. But remember, what you pretend not to see often becomes what controls you. 2. Your body and emotions begin to lose control. Recall a moment that seemed ordinary. You were talking to someone, they smiled, they were polite, yet your body didn't smile with them. Your shoulders tensed slightly, your breath grew shallow. An unexplained ache spread down your arm. You couldn't explain what was happening, but something deep inside whispered, "Leave." And if you ignored it, you saw it days later. Weeks later, the truth slowly revealed itself. This wasn't someone you should trust. This wasn't a place you should remain in. The body is a more sensitive instrument than we imagine. It holds memories longer than the mind and responds more honestly than any rationalization you invent in your head. Someone might convince you they love you, that they're just being caring, that you're too sensitive. But your body will give you a clearer answer than any of their words. If you feel breathless, your stomach clenches. Your restlessness grows without cause. You are being warned. Not by thought, but by your biological intuition. Some intrusions in life don't arrive in recognizable form. They don't come with a scream. They come like a cold gust across your shoulders in midsummer, like a quiet buzzing in your ears that no one else hears. And when those signals appear, you have two choices. Listen to your body or silence it to please others. And when you choose the latter long enough, you start to lose the most precious thing of all, the ability to trust yourself. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "When the soul is disturbed, the body will speak." This is not a metaphor, it is a truth. When you live out of sync with your peace, whether because of someone, a certain environment, or an invisible influence you can't yet name, your body is the first to reflect that disorder. No one knows your rhythm better than you, so if you feel an odd exhaustion, sleeplessness without cause, drained after what seemed like a harmless interaction, you must pause. Not to rest, but to listen. Listen to the pain. Listen to the tightness in your gut. Listen to the breath you just held back in that conversation. It is not weakness. It is the language of physical intuition. And if you are brave enough to interpret it, you'll realize every major upheaval in life was preceded by the smallest tremors. They are missed only by those too busy to feel, or too quick to believe that the body can't be telling the truth. You might not have evidence. You might not dare to speak it, but you know. You know deeply, and sometimes, knowing yet ignoring that is the price you'll later pay in the form of your deepest wounds. So the next time your body speaks, don't dismiss it. Don't be quick to blame stress, age, or the weather. Ask instead, what is my body trying to say that my mind is not ready to admit? Because in this world, where the invisible can cause visible damage, the body is the most loyal gatekeeper of your soul. And it always speaks if you're still enough to listen. There are days when you sit alone in your familiar room. The light still warm, the music still gentle, but your heart feels darker than ever. No incident, no bad news, yet you feel heavy, cold from within. You don't want to reply to messages, don't want to talk, don't want to eat, don't even want to cry because there's no longer a reason strong enough for tears. You know you're not okay, but you can't point to why. And then, like a reflex, you blame yourself. Maybe you think you're weak, depressed, or lost. But if you look closely, you'll notice these emotions didn't arise from within, they feel imposed from outside. They come like a fog, bringing no visible storm, but enough to cloud everything you once believed to be you. Emotions are natural human responses to circumstances. But not every emotion you feel belongs to you. Sometimes you absorb the moods of others without realizing. Sometimes you live in a space with a low, weary frequency without understanding why you're so drained. And sometimes you carry someone else's negativity implanted through a glance, through repeated presence, through words that seem harmless but quietly dismantle your belief in yourself. Epictetus once said, "Don't ask why you're angry. Ask who profits when you lose control." This question applies not only to anger, but to every abnormal emotional state. Who benefits when you feel small, anxious, insecure, or useless? Who is always around just before you start feeling terrible, start thinking you're not enough, start collapsing under emotions that have no name? And if you can identify a face, a voice, or a familiar space that keeps reappearing during those dark days, then maybe you've unknowingly opened your door to a kind of energy that doesn't belong to you. a form of manipulation that doesn't need to scream, a form of domination that doesn't need threats. It only needs you to lack the clarity to ask, is this really my emotion? Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "People don't lose peace because of circumstances, but because they've lost their inner boundaries." And those boundaries begin when you can distinguish which feelings are truly yours and which were invisibly imposed upon you. You cannot heal a wound if you don't know where it came from. And you cannot reclaim peace until you admit that some sadness, fear, or disappointment was never yours to carry. So when your emotions begin to spiral, your moods shift unpredictably, or your spirit declines for no reason, don't rush to blame yourself. Do one simple thing that many have forgotten. Ask questions. Not to judge, but to understand. Not to find a villain, but to reclaim the sovereignty of your mind and spirit. Because emotions are waves, and if you don't recognize what's reaching you, you will be swept away. But if you're awake enough to know which voices are yours and which are just external noise, you'll no longer fear your emotions. You'll stand in the middle of the storm and remain unmoved. That is the freedom the Stoics sought, and that is the power you can reclaim starting now. 3. There are things in your environment that don't belong there. Have you ever walked into your home, shut the familiar door behind you, and instead of feeling safe, you felt misplaced? No one's in the room. No noise, no obvious signs that something is wrong. But the air feels different, thicker, heavier. You take a deep breath, not to relax, but to fight off the tightness in your chest. You wonder, is it work, fatigue, the rainy weather? But the more you justify, the clearer it becomes. No, the problem isn't inside you. It's in the space around you. They say, home is where you return to. But if every time you walk in, your body contracts, your mind feels clouded, and your heart tightens without reason, then maybe that house, or more precisely, the energy within it, is no longer a place of refuge. Every space carries a frequency. It records the energy of the people who enter, the memories created, and the objects placed there, whether with clear intent or subtle undertone. And when your living environment absorbs enough negativity, even in small, unspoken doses, it starts to speak through a silence that carries weight. You may have felt it before, but brushed it off, because you thought there's no reason. Everything looks fine. And precisely because everything looks fine, you begin to doubt yourself. You think you're being overly sensitive, tired, overreacting. But let me remind you of this. You don't need a reason to feel what you feel. The feeling is the signal. And when you feel your home pressing down on you even just slightly, it deserves to be noticed more than dismissed. In Stoic philosophy, Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "A rational mind will always sense when something is trying to pull it off course." This applies not just to people, but to space, because everything around you affects you, even when you can't see it. The air may carry an unplaceable scent, the light may be slightly off, the arrangement in the room just misaligned enough to disturb your mental clarity. But you'll only notice it if you let yourself pause and feel instead of racing through your life on autopilot. One of the most common mistakes is believing that unease at home is just a small thing. But when you live in that misalignment long enough, it begins to erode your emotional resilience, disrupt your sleep, destabilize your mood, and eventually make you believe that the problem is you. When in fact, you may just be living in an environment that has shifted frequency and you are the only one sensitive enough to feel it. So if you find yourself sighing more often as you step into your home, if you tend to sit in your car longer before walking in, or if you feel your love for your space fading, don't rush to redecorate. Rethink how much you trust your first instinct, because your soul doesn't lie. And if your home is no longer a place of restoration, it needs to be re-examined, not from the floorboards, but from the energy it's running on. Sometimes you bring things home out of politeness. A small gift from someone you don't fully trust. An odd decorative statue you picked up at a weekend market. A necklace you wear to please someone. You place them on the table, hang them in the bedroom, tuck them into a drawer, and then forget they're there. But your body doesn't forget. From the moment those items entered your living space, something began to shift slowly, faintly, silently, but undeniably. You might find yourself distracted. Your sleep becomes restless, your emotions fluctuate. Plants in your home begin to wilt, even though you care for them. Simple conversations grow tense. You lose your temper over trivial things and then feel guilt without reason. You start feeling unlike yourself, and you ask, "Am I being too sensitive?" But instead of listening, you dismiss it, assigning it a comfortable label. Probably just coincidence. But did you know that in many ancient cultures, disruption doesn't come with a shout, but with an object placed in the right spot, at the right time, with the right intent? Not everyone believes this. Stoics don't endorse superstition, but they do teach. Don't dismiss what repeats before you've understood it. If each time you touch that item, a chill runs through you. If every time you walk past it, something inside you drops into shadow, what you're sensing isn't an illusion. It's a refined awareness you've forgotten how to hear. Marcus Aurelius once emphasized, "Whatever can influence the mind, we are responsible for it." In a world where words can cut sharper than knives, objects too can carry the frequency of their giver. An old photograph, an unopened letter, a gift from someone no longer in your life, all are clues to the emotional field you are living in, often unknowingly. If you feel uneasy but can't identify the source, step away from logic for a moment and into observation. Look at your space with new eyes. Is there something you avoid looking at too long? An item that makes you uneasy when near? A detail you never really chose but that's still there in your space? When you start answering those questions, you'll realize a part of your energy is being anchored by things you no longer need to keep. And when you remove those things from your space, you're not just cleaning your home, you're clearing your mind. You're severing an unseen thread between you and a frequency that no longer serves you. That's not mysticism, that's intentional living. And Stoics don't believe in luck, they believe in conscious action. So the next time you're tempted to call something a coincidence, ask yourself instead, is this truly random, or have I simply not been clear-eyed enough to see it? 4. A meaningful relationship suddenly breaks without reason. You once had someone close, maybe a friend, a partner, a family member, someone who shared everything with you, who once looked at you with warmth, listened without judgment, and stood by you whenever you fell. That relationship wasn't perfect, but it was real. Then one day you noticed the warmth in their eyes had changed. The care that once felt familiar now feels distant. Conversations that used to stretch for hours are now reduced to a few curt replies. And what hurts the most isn't the distance, but the silence without explanation. You try to find a reason. You ask yourself, what did I do wrong? You reread every message, replay every meeting, analyze every word you may have said without thinking. But no matter how closely you review it, you can't find anything significant enough to cause someone so close to suddenly turn away. And then, like a reflex of those who know how to love, you start to blame yourself, not because you are truly at fault, but because you can't bear the meaninglessness of the fracture. You'd rather be wrong than believe that something beyond your control has intervened. But the truth is, not every change begins with you. Some bonds that once felt solid are undone when something slips between. A new person, a strange environment, a gift carrying tainted energy, a word spoken carelessly that takes root like poison. These things don't always slam the door to your connection. They seep in like underground water, eroding trust and dissolving intimacy quietly but precisely. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "If something good begins to drift away from you, don't chase it. Watch it go and ask, what has come between us that I haven't yet seen?" This isn't advice to let go of someone you love. It's an invitation to release the burden of owning every cause, to open yourself to the possibility that sometimes you did nothing wrong and still the relationship breaks because something unseen did not want you to keep the good thing. And if you are clear-headed enough to trace the timeline, you'll see it. Everything began to shift from a particular moment. Did someone enter your life or theirs? Is there something in your home you never consciously chose? Was there a moment you felt unsettled, but dismissed because there was no proof? That wasn't paranoia. That was a warning you ignored. So when someone you love turns distant without reason, you don't have to fix it right away. Step back. Not to give up, but to see clearly. To identify what or who is standing in between. Because sometimes the way to keep someone isn't to hold tighter, but to clear the space that keeps you from truly seeing one another. Sometimes you say something simple, "I'm okay, go ahead and work," or just, "I need time to think," but the other person reacts as if you've said something offensive. Words that once bonded now cut both ways. Acts of kindness are met with suspicion. You send a normal message and receive coldness. You try to reconnect and get pushed away. And what's most frightening, it doesn't just happen once. It repeats, constantly, with no explanation, no clear issue to sit down and resolve like two adults. Only an ongoing haze like smoke clouding every good intention, and inside you, a quiet voice begins to whisper, "Am I doing something wrong?" But the more you think, the more absurd it seems. The relationship was strong. Communication used to be effortless. So what caused the current between you to break? In Stoic philosophy, Epictetus once emphasized, keep your mind clear enough to recognize what is pulling you away from yourself. When misunderstandings stop being isolated and become repetitive, you are no longer in conflict. You are in an energy field that's been disrupted. And very likely, some distorted signal sent through a person, a malicious whisper, an object you received, something that accidentally entered your space is pulling apart a bond that was once pure. Pay attention to the timeline. Did tension begin after someone appeared? After going somewhere? After receiving a gift? The seemingly harmless a bracelet, a decoration, an unopened letter sometimes aren't just objects. They may be vessels carrying the intent to interfere with the bond between two souls. And the terrifying part is, they don't destroy with force. They distort just enough to make you and the other no longer understand, no longer see, no longer trust what once was self-evident. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "If a relationship shifts too quickly and without a clear reason, don't just examine the people, inquire who has placed a hidden weight on the scale." Not to grow suspicious of everyone, but to open the possibility that neither you nor the other has changed, but the pathway between you has been altered. If you've ever felt like you were speaking your truth, but the other couldn't hear it, if every effort to connect came out warped, if love turned into doubt, then it's time to step back, not to give up, but to purify the frequency between you and that person. Clean the space. Remove objects you never truly chose to keep. Disconnect for a while from people who influence you too much, but with unclear intent. And above all, ask yourself a question so simple most never dare to ask. Am I really speaking to them, or just trying to push through a layer of energy that doesn't belong to us? Because sometimes the one you love never truly left. They've only been pulled slightly off course by a signal you hadn't yet noticed. And to reconnect, you don't need to shout louder. You only need to create a space clear enough for two souls to hear each other again. 5. Everything falls apart right before success happens. Have you ever felt like you were standing before the gates of heaven, hands stretched toward the handle only to be pulled back by an invisible force? The first time you think, maybe I was just missing something. The second time, perhaps it wasn't the right time. But by the third, fourth, fifth time, when the same pattern repeats, everything looks promising. You're excited, you wait, and then it vanishes right as you're about to receive it. You begin to realize this is no longer a coincidence. A job that felt certain canceled the day before signing. A promising relationship broken after a strange conversation. A long-awaited trip postponed due to a bizarre last-minute glitch. A burst of creative energy gone the moment you sit down to begin. When good things keep arriving only to retreat in an instant, you're no longer dealing with fate's delays, but with someone or something interfering with your momentum just before transformation. What makes it dangerous is that it doesn't come in a hostile form. No one opposes you openly. No clear conflict, no noise, just a series of tiny logical events that happen at just the right moment. And that precise timing is the signal you must pay attention to. A fall on the day of your presentation, a sudden illness during interview week, a storm ruining a critical meeting. You can't name the culprit, but it feels as though someone or something doesn't want you to move forward. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "If the shadow falls in one direction, the light must come from the opposite." That line reminds you, all repetition carries a message. And if the messages collapse before breakthrough, then you shouldn't keep trying the same way, but shift your perspective. You may be hindered by what you cannot see. An object charged with opposing energy, a jealous gaze, a space filled with chaos, a string of blessings that sound more like burdens. You've been calling them harmless, while they've been quietly rewriting your fate. And most importantly, don't let the repetition make you doubt yourself. Don't let those final stumbles convince you that you're not good enough, not worthy, not ready. You may have been ready for a long time, but you're walking with baggage that doesn't belong to you. A toxic gaze, a gift with strange intentions, or an energetic tie you haven't been clear-minded enough to cut. So, next time you find yourself almost succeeding, sit down and map out the entire sequence. Don't look for reasons. Look for patterns. Who shows up when things begin to unravel? What object is always near you when failure strikes? What space always drains you after you leave it? Because once you see the pattern, you'll see the invisible hand pulling you back every time you're about to rise. And once you see it, you cannot stay still. Because Stoics don't believe in randomness. They believe in unemotional observation, and through that observation, you reclaim something you thought you'd lost control over your own fate. Have you ever felt like you did everything right? You worked relentlessly. You corrected mistakes, studied hard, disciplined yourself, walked the path step by step. Finally, you stand before the turning point. One click, one confirmation call, one launch, one nod. And then it all disappears, as if it had never been promised. No betrayal, no error. No one to blame. Yet the result never comes. The first time, you call it a lesson. The second, you tell yourself, maybe I'm not ready. The third time, you call it a test. But by the fourth, when you feel a hidden hand pulling you back, just as you're about to break through, you begin to understand. This is no longer a learning curve, but a pattern of sabotage. Sophisticated sabotage doesn't use words. It doesn't threaten, block, or deny your success outright. It simply ensures you never arrive. It keeps you in the loop of almost. You almost launched the project, almost signed the contract, almost got the relationship you wanted, almost broke through your limits, but almost never becomes arrived. And the more it repeats, the more you doubt yourself. Epictetus once said, "When you've done everything within your control and the result still doesn't come, look beyond yourself." Stoics don't believe in blaming, but they believe in honest observation. And the truth is, some energies don't want you to evolve. Some presences want to keep you in the safety of familiarity, not because they're evil, but because they cannot survive in the light you're walking toward. And the simplest way to stop you from reaching that light is to pull you back just before transformation. It might be someone who always encourages you, but right when you're about to do something big, they say, "Wait, are you sure?" It might be an item you carry with you believing it's lucky, but since owning it, nothing has ever completed. It might be a corner of your room that drains your energy every time you work there, or a doubt that wasn't yours but was planted in you through a glance or a gentle warning. These forces don't block you by shouting, they just throw off your rhythm from the moment of ignition. Marcus Aurelius once reminded us, "The strong man isn't the one who breaks all barriers, but the one who notices early which barriers were built to hold him back." And the greatest danger is not failure, it's being made to believe you should get used to almost succeeding. If that's happening in your life, don't try to run faster. Be still. Look deeply at everything around you. The new friend, the object you always carry, the space you dwell in, the thoughts that come up every time you're about to leap. Clear them out. Clean up. Remove the anchors keeping you stuck in the gray zone. Because freedom doesn't come from breaking the final door, but from realizing the key was never hidden, it was just wrapped in influences you thought were harmless. And once you remove the disguise, the path that's long been open will become clearer than ever before. I used to believe what I went through was just coincidence, misfortune, or the usual challenges everyone must face. But the longer I live, the deeper I walk into the journey of understanding myself and the world, the more I realize there are things that can't be explained by logic, nor dismissed by reason. They seep into life like shadows that trail behind the light, quietly, persistently, and only seen when we're still enough to feel them. I no longer brush off the almost successes, the sudden mood swings, or the relationships that fracture without a clear reason. Not out of fear, but out of clarity. As the Stoics once taught, if something unseen is at work, the first thing we must do is learn to see it with eyes that no longer remain shut. If you found this message meaningful, please like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you won't miss the next content. And always remember, light doesn't need to prove it's stronger than darkness. It only needs to show up. I'll see you in the next video.